wisdom of the middle way. Nagarjuna's Mullamadhyamakakarika. Translation and commentary by J.L. Garfield. Part 1, the text of Mullamadhyamakakarika. Chapter 8, Examination of the agent and action. 1. This existent agent does not perform an existent action, nor does some non-existent agent perform some non-existent action. 2. An existent entity has no activity. There would also be action without an agent. An existent entity has no activity. There would also be agent without action. 3. If a non-existent agent were to perform a non-existent action, then the action would be without a cause and the agent would be without a cause. 4. Without a cause, the effect and its cause will not occur. Without this, activity and agent and action are not possible. 5. If activity, etc., are not possible, entities and non-entities are not possible. If there are neither entities nor non-entities, effects cannot arise from them. 6. If there are no effects, liberation and paths to higher realms will not exist. So all of activity would be without purpose. 7. An existent and non-existent agent does not perform an existent and non-existent action. Existence and non-existence cannot pertain to the same thing. For how could they exist together? 8. An actual agent does not perform a non-actual action. Nor by a non-actual one is an actual one performed. From this, all of those errors would follow. 9. An existent agent does not perform an action that is unreal or both real and unreal, as we have already agreed. 10. A non-existent agent does not perform an action that is unreal or both real and unreal, as we have already agreed. 11. An existent and non-existent agent does not perform an action that is unreal or both real and unreal, as we have agreed. 12. Action depends upon the agent. The agent itself depends on action. One cannot see any way to establish them differently. 13. From this elimination of agent and action, one should elucidate appropriation in the same way. Through action and agent, all remaining things should be understood. Chapter 9, Examination of the prior entity. 1. Since sight and hearing, etc., and feeling, etc., exist, he who has and uses them must exist prior to those, some say. 2. If there were no existent thing, how could seeing, etc., arise? It follows from this that prior to this, there is an existent thing. 3. How is an entity existing prior to seeing, hearing, etc., and the felt, etc., itself known? 4. If it can abide without the seen, etc., then, without a doubt, they can abide without it. 5. Someone is disclosed by something. Something is disclosed by someone. Without something, how can someone exist? Without someone, how can something exist? 6. While prior to all of seeing, etc., that prior entity doesn't exist, through seeing, etc., by another one, that other one becomes disclosed. 7. If prior to all of seeing, etc., no prior entity exists, how could an entity prior to each seeing exist? 8. If the seer itself is the hearer itself, and the feeler itself, at different times, prior to each of these he would have to arise. But this makes no sense. 9. If the seer itself is distinct, the hearer is distinct and the feeler is distinct, then when there is a seer there would also be a hearer, and there would have to be many selves. 10. Seeing and hearing, etc., and feeling, etc., and that from which these are arisen, There is no existent there. 11. Seeing and hearing, etc. And feeling, etc. Comma. If that to which they belong does not exist, they themselves do not exist. 12. For whomever prior to, simultaneous with, or after seeing, etc. There is nothing. For such a one, assertions like, it exists, or, it does not exist, such conceptions will cease. Chapter 10, Examination of Fire and Fuel. 1. If fuel were fire, then agent and action would be one. If fire were different from fuel, then it could arise without fuel. 2. It would be forever a flame. Flames could be ignited without a cause. Its beginning would be meaningless. In that case, it would be without any action. 3. Since it would not depend on another, ignition would be without a cause. If it were eternally in flames, starting it would be meaningless. 4. So, if one thinks that which is burning is the fuel, if it is just this, how is this fuel being burned? 5. If they are different, and if one not yet connected isn't connected, the not yet burned will not be burned. They will not cease. If they do not cease, then it will persist with its own characteristic. 6. Just as a man and a woman connect to one another as man and woman, so if fire were different from fuel, fire and fuel would have to be fit for connection. 7. And, if fire and fuel preclude each other, then fire being different from fuel, it must still be asserted that they connect. 8. If fire depends on fuel, and fuel depends on fire, on what are fire and fuel established as dependent? Which one is established first? 9. If fire depends on fuel, it would be the establishment of an established fire. And the fuel could be fuel without any fire. 10. If that on which an entity depends is established on the basis of the entity depending on it, what is established in dependence on what? 11. What entity is established through dependence? If it is not established, then how could it depend? However, if it is established merely through dependence, that dependence makes no sense. 12. Fire is not dependent upon fuel. Fire is not independent of fuel. Fuel is not dependent upon fuel. Fuel is not independent of fire. 13. Fire does not come from something else, nor is fire in fuel itself. Moreover, fire and the rest are just like the moved, the not moved, and the goer. 14. Fuel is not fire. Fire does not arise from anything different from fuel. Fire does not possess fuel. Fuel is not in fire, nor vice versa. 15. Through discussion of fire and fuel, the self and the aggregates, the part and cloth altogether, without remainder, have been explained. 16. I do not think that those who teach that the self is the same as or different from the entities understand the meaning of the doctrine. Chapter 11, Examination of the Initial and Final Limits. 1. When asked about the beginning, the great sage said that nothing is known of it. Cyclic existence is without end and beginning. So there is no beginning or end. 2. Where there is no beginning or end, how could there be a middle?